Today's lesson is 8EC. It's about fair testing, and here in this lesson you are going to learn about variables, the types of variables such as independent variable, dependent variables and control variables. Right, so I have prepared a small short note which will be easier for you to understand what are the basic things in this. Right, let's see what are variables. They are factors. They can change and they have different values. So if that's what is a variable, you can say it's a factor which can change and have different values. Right, so a variable you can divide into two groups as independent variable and dependent variable. What is independent variable? That means we choose the values of this. Dependent one is the variable we are measuring. So like the name suggests, it varies or depends on the independent variable changes. Right? So it depends on the independent variable. If we change this, it affects this. Is it clear?
Yes.
That's why we say it's dependent on the independent variable. Right. There's another group of variables called control variables. What are control variables? These are controlled as far as possible. As much as we can, we are controlling them because we don't want these to affect the dependent variable. Right? So these can affect the dependent variable, so it's very important we control them. Now when you do a fair test, fair test is an experiment, right? Why we call it fair test? Because all these control variables are controlled there. So then the data produced by these are valid data, because all the other things are controlled, so we can only worry about the dependent variable and the independent variable. So this valid data means it does what it's supposed to do without any problem from the other variables. Is that clear?
Yes.
So fair test only shows the effect of the independent variable on the dependent variable. So we don't need to worry about the other variables which are controlled here. Is it clear?
Yes.
So when you are planning an experiment, there are things you need to identify and how you have to plan it. So if you need to do an experiment, that means a fair test, you need to first identify which one is going to be the dependent variable and which one is going to be the independent variable. Once you have identified these two, then you can identify all other variables which are affecting the dependent variable. You have to identify them.
Yes.
Once you identify all these other variables, you have to plan how we are going to control them. Is that clear?
Yes.
So these are the main things you need to understand about the types of variables and how you do a fair test. Okay, once you know this, it's easy for you to understand this lesson. Right. So the things I have discussed there in the short note all are given here. And there's one question, the first one. You see this experiment, two variables in this experiment are the volume of fuel burnt. That is one. The other one is the time it takes for all the fuel to burn. So those are the two variables. Now in this you can see this small dish, and there are two different volumes of the same fuel to be burned. Right? Now they are asking you in the question, first question, in the experiment shown in photo A, which is the independent variable and which is the dependent variable? And you have to explain your answer. How do you write it?
We wrote in independent because it has different volumes.
You have to first say which one is the independent variable. What is independent variable? Now independent variable is what? The one we choose the values. Which one are we choosing the value from these two?
Both.
Huh?
No, only one.
Which variables are we? Now there are two variables. One is the volume of fuel burnt and the time it takes. So which one are we choosing? The volume of fuel burnt. That's why we have taken two different ones. Two different volumes. Okay. So independent variable is the volume of fuel. And the dependent variable is the time taken. Dependent is the time taken. Explanation, just stop it for a minute. And the explanation why we chose volume of fuel as the independent and time taken as the dependent is, you can write down, the time taken depends on the volume of fuel. So the explanation for that is, the time taken depends on the volume of fuel. Right, so next part it says about the control variables. So let's just go through it. In many experiments, you want to test the effect of a single variable on another. You want to find out how the independent variable affects the dependent variable. So you do not want any other variables affecting the dependent variable. It's important to control these other variables as far as possible. So they are called control variables. I showed you that. What are these? So this, you can see it's like a very shortened form summary of the textbook notes what they have given. So you can refer to it if you need. Right, the next one is controlling variables is very important in industry. MMT is a substance added to petrol to reduce pollution. Scientists found the best way of making MMT by changing the amount of one reactant and measuring how much MMT was produced. They also discovered that it was important to control the temperature during this reaction. So what is being controlled? The temperature, right? And then in 2007 in Florida, USA, something went wrong with an MMT factory cooling system. The temperature rise caused an explosion that spread debris up to a mile away. You can see what has happened to the MMT laboratory. These are the remains. Can you see?
Yes.
So the variable that should be controlled was not controlled there because of a failure in the cooling system. So what happened? Temperature was rising, causing an explosion, and this is the final result of what happened. Right, now by looking at photo A, we are referring back to this one. Okay?
Yes.
And they are asking you a question. Look at photo A. One variable that should be controlled is the type of fuel. So along with the volumes, you have to make sure you use the same fuel. If you use two different kinds, you are not controlling the other variables.
Yes.
So it is going to have an effect on the dependent variable we are going to check, which is the time, right? So we have to make sure we are using the same type of fuel. Explain how using different fuels might affect the dependent variable. So now they are asking to explain why different fuels may have an effect on the dependent variable. Dependent variable is the time here. They may burn at different rates. One of the reasons is that. So different fuel have different rates of burning. So if you take two different ones, the times will obviously change. So you can't get a fair test in that. You can't have fair results.
Yes.
Right? So you can write down for A. You can write down for A, different fuel may burn at different rates. Different fuel may burn at different rates. And what happens when this happens? It changes the dependent variable. So you can write it within brackets, changing the dependent variable. Alright. Okay, next question they are asking in part B. Describe one other variable that should be controlled in this experiment. Now one thing is type of fuel. Another variable that you need to control. If not, what effect it might have if it was not controlled properly, right? Can you think and tell what type of variable you need to control here other than the type of fuel? Volume means, yes, you have to, you can't control it, no. Volume you are changing, no. So you can't take volume of fuel because it's independent one. You are changing it to get the exact timing, right?
Yes.
So you can't take volume of fuel, but other than that, what else you need to control? One thing is the dish you are using. Now imagine you are taking different volumes here, no, as independent variable. Now imagine you are taking one like this and another one with a, let's say, something like this, and have another type of volume. So now first one you are using A and B, let's have it like that. So now you are going to measure the timing, right? Now in this, how is the possibility for it to mix with the oxygen? For it to burn, we know for combustion we need oxygen, right? So in this one, it's freely available, freely available, any amount of oxygen, because all the sides are open. It has a good flow of oxygen for the combustion to happen. Where in this case, it is covered from all the sides and only allowing the oxygen to enter from the top, right? So if we don't use the same dish for both instances, is there going to be a change in the amount of oxygen it's getting? Yes, it is going to have a change, because in this one it's allowing oxygen to mix nicely, but here it's only allowed from the top.
Yes.
So then this also needs to be controlled,
Yes.
right? Okay, so you can write down the answer, the dish in which the fuel is burnt. This is another variable that you need to control. The dish in which the fuel is burnt. Now we are writing the answer for question 2, part B. the dish in which the fuel is burnt, and you have to explain it, no, what kind of a effect it's going to have if it's not controlled properly. So what is the reason you are going to write? Different sizes will contain different amounts of oxygen. Is that clear?
Yes.
Right, so it's not like just doing an experiment. You need to understand and identify the dependent variable, independent variable, and all the other variables which need to be controlled. And you should know the reason why they need to be controlled. Okay? Right, now let's move on to question 3. In question 3, in the experiments to find the best way to make MMT, now it's referring to the paragraph given here, right? The second paragraph here. So you can go through the paragraph and find out these answers. So you have to find which was the independent variable here. Once again, I'll remind you what is independent. The variable we choose the values. We are choosing the values for this. Dependent variable is the one we are measuring, right? Now keeping that in mind, tell me which one is the independent and which one is the dependent.
Amount of one reactant is for A.
Yeah, the amount of reactant. You don't need to write 1. You can just say the amount of reactant, because this is the one we are going to change. See, it says changing the amount of one reactant, right? So that is the amount of reactant is the independent variable here. And for the dependent variable is the one we are going to measure, right? What are we going to measure? How much MMT was produced. So you can say the amount of MMT. And then there's final one in part C, which variable was not controlled properly and caused the explosion. Which one should be controlled? The temperature. The one they failed to control was also the temperature, and that's why it caused an explosion. So the independent variable is the amount of reactant, dependent variable is the amount of MMT, and the variable which was not controlled properly and caused the explosion is the temperature. Is that clear so far?
Yes.
Okay, so let's move to the next page. This is a working scientifically part. So in this one it says about planning a fair test. So again I will remind what is given here only. I have simplified and written here, right? So fair test means all the control variables are controlled here. So it will produce valid data, which is meant by valid is it does what it's supposed to do, and it only shows the effect of the independent variable on the dependent variable. So experiment, when we do, we need to identify dependent variable and the independent variable. Once you identify these two, you know the other ones are all the other variables affecting the dependent variable. You need to identify them and then plan how to control it. Once you do this only, you can say that this test is being done in a fair manner. Alright, okay, so let's go to the experiment. So this is what I explained here in these two, so I'm not going to read it. The details are given in this. Whoever wants to go through it, just you can read the paragraph and see. Right, now there's an experiment here which describes how to carry an experiment using the equipment in photo. See, let's see what are they doing here. So here they have told very important thing when you are carrying out an experiment is wear eye protection. Do not do it without that, because you are catching heated material equipment here, so you need to be very careful before you handle or before you perform these type of experiments. Right, in method A they say place one tea light on a heat resistant mat and another tea light on a block on a heat resistant mat. So this is the small candle they are telling, the tea light. So in this one these are placed under on top of a heat resistant mat. So in the laboratories these are available, right?
Yes.
So you have to put the heat resistant mat and keep the candle over that, and another one with the same heat resistant mat. You have to keep a block here and keep then you have to place another tea light. Okay, measure the height between the surface and the base of the wick of both tea lights and record the values. So height between the surface and the base of the wick of both tea lights and record the values. Then light both tea lights and cover them both immediately with heat resistant glass containers. Once again, not just glass containers, heat resistant glass containers. Once you cover them immediately after lighting, you need to start the stopwatch. Right? For what are we using the stopwatch?
To measure the time.
Yes, exactly. So in D it says measure the time taken for each flame to go out. Go out means for the flame to disappear. And you have to record the values there. Okay?
Yes.
Right, next let's see what are they saying. You usually record results from experiments in a table. See, you have to tabulate the results you are getting in a table. It is a convention that the independent variable goes on the left hand column. Usually independent variable should come here. This is what we are changing, right? And then comes the other one, length of time is the dependent variable. So left hand side column, remember to write the independent variable. Right hand side you have to write the dependent variable. And it's also very important to write the units, right? So you know height can be measured in millimeters, centimeters, even in meters. So you need to tell exactly which measurement you used here. Then also for the time, the length of time, it can be milliseconds, seconds, minutes, hours. So it's important you use the correct unit there, right? So you might lose marks if you don't write the units in these tables. Okay. Now here the height of the wick is given as 1, 2, 3, 4. So the heights, so they are asking you to measure the height between the surface and the base of the wick, right? So when you are measuring the heights, you can see now in this one they have taken four different heights. Now here it shows only 2 different heights, so you can just keep on changing this and measure the exact heights of these. Okay, so that only you have to write it here, and then the length of time you have to observe it and write it down. Right. Identify the independent and dependent variables in the experiment described in the method above. Who can tell me the answer? Right, so it's given here as well. So independent variable you can use, you can write height of the wick in centimeters, and the dependent variable is the length of time it burned or length of time it took for the flame to go out. Okay, right. So in question 5, they are asking you to use your answer to question 4 to state the question this experiment is set up to answer. It's like asking what it's supposed to do. Okay, what you are supposed to find out. What can you tell? Using the answer to question 4. So using the independent variable and the dependent variable, can you tell what you're supposed to find out in this?
The height in centimeters.
What is it supposed to find?
Seconds?
No. It's supposed to find, you can write a similar answer like this. Does the height of the flame above the base of the container affect the time it takes for the flame to go out? So it's like, if I explain it in a very simple way, the height from here to here, they are asking whether this is going to have an effect on the time it takes for the flame to burn out, for the flame to go out, right? So each instance they are measuring this height here. Sorry, not this one, this height. From here to here, right? That is something they want to check. Does the height of the flame above the base of the container affect the time it takes for the flame to go out? Okay. Right. In question 6, they are asking in part A, suggest 2 other variables that could affect the dependent variable. Now what is the dependent variable here? Length of time it burned, right? 2 other variables that could have an effect on the dependent variable. So actually what you have to think is 2 other things, 2 other variables that needs to be controlled, right? Otherwise it's going to have an effect on the dependent variable we are checking.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll keep this screen for a few seconds. You can just go through it, look at the picture and just see which like 2 other variables that could have an effect on the dependent variable. Okay, so I have written the answer here for you. So they are asking you to find 2 variables, no, 2 other variables that could affect the dependent variable. So dependent variable is the time we are measuring there, right? Length of time it burned. So you can choose any 2 from here. I'll just explain what it is. Now before we go to the answer, let's just see. They are first suggesting you to write 2 variables. Once you write the 2 variables, then they are telling you to explain the answer to part A. So whatever the 2 variables you chose here, you have to give the explanation why you think this should be controlled, right? And then you have to say in part C how you could control each of the variable you identified in part A in order to collect valid data. So how we are going to control each of these variables, right? Now let's go through one by one. One is size of the container. Now if you take a small container for one and one big a long container, like a container with a bigger height for this one, is it going to be a fair test? No. Why? Because it affects how much oxygen is available to react with fuel. You can see it's in a contained space. That means it's covered. Only the oxygen available inside is there for it to use for combustion. So the height of the jar or the cover you are using here, the size of the container, it has a huge effect. It has a huge effect on the amount of oxygen it's available. It's readily available inside to burn.
Yes.
So that is one variable. So how we are going to control it? You can control it by using the same size container in each test. So for each test, use the same height container. Alright?
Yes.
Then the next one, another one is type of the candle used. So if you use two different types of candles, it might have a change in the fuel. So change in the rate of reaction. So if the fuel is changed here, maybe the consistency of the wax or whatever it is, it's going to have an effect on the fuel used here. So if the fuel change, you are going to have a change in the rate of reaction.
Yes.
So how are you going to control it? You can control by using same type of light or candle. Same type of candle if you use, you can control this. Another thing is length of wick. Now if you take length of wick is this part, what is burning here. You can see like a small black color, like a very thin line. Right? That's a wick. Length of wick is another factor, another variable you can say that will have an effect on the dependent variable. Why we say it? Because it affects how quickly the fuel reaches the point where combustion is taking place. So how can you control this? You can control by trimming the wicks of the candles so that they are the same length. Right?
Yeah.
So in one, if the wick is a bit longer than the other one, you can trim them into the same height, same length. Okay? So then in that way, you can control the length of wick. The last one is the length of time candle was burning before it was placed inside the container. So now we are first lighting this.
Yeah.
After lighting, now we are covering it with the container. So now it's talking about the length of time candle was burning before it was covered. Understood?
Yes.
So even if everything else is controlled, and if you took a little, like few seconds even delay to cover it in each case, then it's going to have an effect on the dependent variable.
Yeah.
So what is the effect it's going to have? How much wax has melted and is able to travel up the wick to the point of combustion. Right? And is able, yes, and this can be controlled by allowing the candles to burn for the same length of time before covering with the containers. So once you light it, you can allow like 5 seconds or 3 seconds. You can measure the time. Once the 3 second comes, you can quickly cover it. Even for the second time, once it's lit, wait for 3 seconds and then cover it. Right? By doing it, you can control the length of time the candle burned before it was covered. Is that clear? So here I have given 4 different variables that can be controlled, that will have an effect on the dependent variable. So you can choose 2 of them and write down the answer. Okay? Right, so now we are going to discuss the last activity sheet we have on EC. This is EC 7, it's about energy in fuels. Right, let's go through it and write down the answers to the questions given there. So here you can see some alcohols can be used as fuels like hydrocarbons. Something we learned now. We know about hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons consist only hydrogen and carbon. Now we know some alcohols also can be used as fuels, and hydrocarbon is an example of that. For example, bioethanol. Some new names that you are coming across. Bioethanol is used instead of petrol in some vehicles. Students carried out an experiment to compare the amount of energy released by a range of alcohols. So you can see the range of alcohols, they are given here, right?
Yes.
That color is ugly. I'll use another color. Okay, so these are the types of alcohol they have used for the experiment, right? What are they going to compare? The amount of energy released, right? The diagram shows the equipment used in the experiment. So here what are the things you can see? There is a heat resistant mat given there. Then there is a burner containing liquid fuel, right? So whatever the fuel we are using, type of alcohol here will be placed inside this one. And then what we have, a tripod, and then we have a small mesh here, and we have a beaker with water inside it with a thermometer. Right, this is the apparatus they have given. Okay, now in this experiment the mass of fuel was measured before combustion. So for each instance, each type of alcohol, they have taken the initial mass of fuel before combustion, right? Combustion continued until 100 cubic centimeters. So in this one, how much of water, is there for the volume? It's 100 cubic centimeters. That's a volume of water, right? So they had been continuing the combustion until this much of water increased in temperature by 30 degrees Celsius, right? Increased by 30 degrees when the flame was put out. So until it reaches 30 degrees in temperature, this was burning or going through combustion. After that the flame is put out. The mass of fuel left at the end of each experiment was also measured. So this is the initial mass of fuel, and here's the final mass of fuel. Okay, the table shows the results. So you can see, like we discussed earlier, the units are given. Can you see? So these masses are measured in grams. Right, let's see for each alcohol. Now what are the types of alcohol? Can you read? Methanol, ethanol, propanol, butanol, pentanol, hexanol. So these are types of alcohols, right? You don't need to remember all the names, just ethanol, propanol and all that. Just have an idea. You will come across these now when you are learning chemistry. So initial mass, I am not going to read these values. So initial masses of each fuel is tabulated here, and then the final mass is also given here, right?
Yes.
When you just look at the results for each instance, for each fuel, what can you tell what has happened? Which one is greater in value? Is it the initial mass or the final mass? Initial mass is greater than the final mass, right?
Yes.
So when once the burning has happened, or when the combustion has taken place, there's a reduction in the mass, final mass. Okay, let's go to the questions now. Combustion reactions are exothermic. We have learnt it before. Combustion reactions are exothermic. Explain what exothermic means. Right, so what does exothermic means? It means, exothermic means the reaction releases energy, usually heating the surroundings. We know when combustion takes place, there's a part of energy released. Energy is released in 3 different types. What are they? As heat, light and sound. So exothermic means we are talking about the heat energy which is released to the environment or the surrounding, right? Then they are saying explain the importance of this for controlling fires. So now they are referring to the fire triangle. Remember the fire triangle?
Yes.
What is there in the fire triangle?
Oxygen, fuel and heat.
Yes. So one of the things that is necessary for a fire, right? For a combustion to take place. So exothermic means heat is being released to the surrounding, which is also an element in the fire triangle which can what? Elevate a fire or combustion process, right?
Yes.
So why it's important to control what is the importance of exothermic for controlling fires? One way to stop a fire is to reduce the temperature. If we take the heat out, the fire is going to stop eventually, right?
Yeah.
So to stop a fire, we need to reduce the temperature. So then the combustion reaction stops. I have given both answers there. You can copy it down for question 1, A and B. I hope that's clear now.
Yes.
Right? So you see, it's this is expecting your knowledge about combustion, exothermic reactions, what it means, and also the fire triangle, how it's affecting a fire, and how we are going to, why it's important when we need to stop a fire. All right? Okay. So after that, let's go to question 2. Right. So question 2 says, look at the equipment for the experiment. I will move to the screen in a little bit. Describe what happens during the experiment. Describe one weakness of the experimental setup for this experiment. Explain the importance of your answer to part B for the reliability of the results. Right. You have to describe what happens during the experiment. This is the experiment. How equipments are all placed, and what you need to find is what happens during the experiment. I'll give 1 minute to think about the answer. Right, so what is happening during the experiment? Energy is released from the fuel burning in the lamp, right? And this energy is transferred to the beaker and the water, and it raises the temperature there, and the change in temperature is measured using a thermometer. This is what's happening. So I have written it here as answer to A. Okay, question 2B, it says describe one weakness of the experimental setup for this experiment. Not all of the energy released by the combustion reaction is transferred to the water. Some may be transferred to the air and the surroundings.
Yes.
So you can write down this answer for B. Then for part C, explain the importance of your answer to part B for the reliability of the results. So if you are for the results to be reliable or for it to be a fair test, what is the importance of your answer in part B? You have to write an explanation there. So I have given an example here. If the proportion of energy transferred to the air and surrounding is different for the different fuels, then the results will not be reliable and it will not be a fair test. Now we know there are 6 types of alcohols used.
Yes.
So we don't know here what type of energy is exactly released and how much of energy will be released to the air, maybe as gases, right? So we have no idea what is exactly being released from here and the quantity of energy released, right? So if it is different for different types of fuels, then the results are not be reliable. Okay, so we don't have any control over that. So then it's not a fair test. We can't say it's a fair test because these things are not controlled and we are unable to control it. Alright? Okay, you can copy it down for part C, question 2 part C. Right, for question 3 they are asking you to suggest variables that would need controlling during the experiment and how they could be controlled. So once again I'll show the apparatus here, the equipment used here. So you can just say which things needs to be controlled during this experiment. Okay, so for question 3 I have given an answer here. You can choose or you might have similar answers. So one thing you can control is the volume of water used. So each time you have to make sure you use 100 cubic centimeters of water for each type of alcohol used. And the other thing is the thermometer used for this should be the same thermometer for each experiment. Because if not, the change in thermometer can have a reading in a different way. There can be slight variations.
Yes.
So it should be the same. Another thing is the height of the beaker from the flame. This height also needs to be the same. Why we are saying that? More of the energy is released will be transferred to the beaker. Some of the energy is going out, but most of it is transferred to the beaker, right? And the closer the beaker is to the flame, then the energy transferred to this will be more. Is it clear?
Yes.
And if we put higher than this, the energy transferred to the beaker will be lesser. Is it clear?
Yes.
So you have to make sure the height of the beaker and the flame is always the same for each experiment, right? So those are the ones which is explained here. You can write down 2 or 3 of them. Alright? Okay. Next for question 4. This is using the table given here. Calculate the mass of each fuel used. I'm sorry, it's not with this one, it's relevant to this table, right? So you have to use the data in this table and find out for each alcohol how much of mass is used. So how do you find it? You can subtract from the final mass, you can subtract the initial mass. Then you will get the amount of or the mass of fuel used. Is it clear?
Yes.
So you can use this one to find the answers to question 4. And question 5, use your answers to question 4 to identify the fuel that releases the most energy per gram of fuel. Explain your answer. So this is per gram, then you are finding how much of fuel is transferred. Yes.